Hello everyone, my name is Gary Wills and welcome to episode 39 of my YouTube channel. In this episode I'm going to show you how I supported my book Throwing Thunderbolts at Salute 52 and show you the game we used, which was called The Best Army in Europe, the Battle of Pirmasens, 14th September 1793. It's a Prussia versus France black powder demonstration game. So this is the leaflet that I generated to support the game and used on the day, and I'm going to talk you through elements of it to explain the background to the game. So at the time in 1793, the Prussian army was widely considered to be the best in Europe, and the Battle of Pirmasens really emphasises what that looked like in reality. During the summer of 1793, the army of the Moselle held the line of the ridge of Schwarzbach around Zweibrücken, and this was about 46 miles west of the River Rhine. And facing them was the Prussian army am Rhine, commanded by the Prussian king. The Duke of Brunswick's Second Corps was based in Pirmasens itself, covering the strategically important town of Kaiserslautern. The new commander of the Moselle and the representative people decided to attack Pirmasens indirectly from the north, having unsuccessfully attacked it from the west. So at 10:30 p.m. On the 13th, the Corps des Vosges, commanded by General Division Moreau, set off from their camp at Hornbach and marched the 10.5 miles or so to Pirmasens. The French hoped to surprise the Prussians by coming at them indirectly, but Brunswick was warned the day before and was well prepared when the French reached the northeast of Pirmasens at a little village called Werbach. So I'm going to show a few slides that put the preceding text into a nice pretty picture. So this is a map from a history of the battle, and it shows on the right hand side of the map the River Rhine, which I've highlighted. And here's Kaiserslautern guarding the approaches to some pretty significant cities on the east bank of the Rhine, Mannheim and up to Koblenz. And here you can see the positions of Pirmasens in the dark blue square and Hornbach, the French camp, in the lighter blue square. And this map shows the march of the French on the night of the 13th, 14th, as I've just described. And you can see also the line of the Prussian outpost to the west of Pirmasens, which had been attacked unsuccessfully in the days leading up to this battle. So this is the map for the battle, which I included in Throwing Thunderbolts, showing the deployment of the French around Werbach and the Prussians around Pirmasens itself. So this shows the terrain on which the battle is fought, and that I tried to model using my Kallistra hexagonal terrain. And the area around Pirmasens is steep, hilly terrain, a lot of it tree covered, but although not in this case. And the normal movements only really possible on the dark brown areas, which I've indicated here with the yellow arrow on the left hand side. Everywhere else is rough ground, and so in black powder terms, I guess a lot of the rules, it halves the speed of all arms on those grounds. However, there are some places which the contours sort of indicate I mean, they're 40-meter contours, so you get some idea of how steep this ground is. But I've highlighted the extra steep slopes on this map using the sort of compound brown line, which I've indicated as an example in the bottom left-hand corner of the map. These extra steep slopes, I've reduced the speed to a quarter speed for infantry and cavalry, and made them impassable to artillery except on any roads or tracks. I mentioned this in the text in Throwing Thunderbolts, although but this map shows it much more clearly. And the final thing is that the streams are in sort of rocky valleys, and they are crossable even by the artillery, but they count as linear obstacles costing 6 centimeters a time. We know they were crossable because some of the French guns actually got onto the Schachberg in the top left-hand corner there. So they couldn't have done that unless they'd crossed these streams. So this chart overlays the historical deployment of the two sides. Essentially, the Prussians were camped to the left of this map, and essentially Brunswick redeployed them to receive the French. And you can stop the video and look at this in detail, but Corbier's division, I'll come on to it, is on the left of the line, with Kalkstein's division on the right, and they extended their line with some a group of Schutzen and a grenadier battalion along the Ruppertwald, which was a forest just off the map to the south. For the French, the French arrived early in the morning, and they were assembled just off the map behind Fairbach, where there was a dip that concealed them from the Prussians. And when he got there, Murat rather belatedly divided them all up into 3 columns for the attack. And you can see the Park artillery at the bottom of their deployment, ready to try and take on the Prussians. The cavalry, Brunswick used the cavalry, the dragoons and cuirassiers to, I think, just to limit the French deployment early on. But as soon as they were engaged by the artillery, they withdrew in line with the infantry, so that it cleared a killing ground in front of the 2 Prussian gun lines. So I'm now going to go through the orders of battles for both sides, and this diagram is an original order of battle for the Prussians, showing how Brunswick's corps was organised. So again, going back to my leaflet, at the very top level, essentially the Prussians were about 8,000 men commanded by the Duke of Brunswick, and the French came to about 12,000 men commanded by General de Division Jean-René Moreau, who not the famous Moreau, but Moreau with an X. And this is the desktop roller banner that I use to give information on the battle to people viewing the table. And so I'm going to take you through the orders of battle using snapshots of that. So here's the French order of battle. And so, as I said at the beginning, the French force was essentially the Corps des Vosges, minus 1 or 2 units that were left back in the camp at Hornbach. And here's a lovely engraving of Jean-René Moreau. And essentially this table will show both the strengths of the battalions as I've been able to find them out, plus how I represented them on the table, a figure ratio of 1 to 33, one figure for 33 men, and plus their black powder size. So the first column, or the right column, was led by Paul Guillaume, and he had a mixture of regular old Royal Army regiments and volunteers, which a pattern which goes through the whole army. One thing that is important to stress is that these weren't permanent organisations. Essentially, he took the generals he had and allocated regiments to them pretty much on the day. And so you can see I'm not going to go through each unit in turn, but each of the infantry units was accompanied by two 4-pounder battalion guns. And there were also tirailleurs drawn from those infantry units, plus some free companies of chasseurs, in this case Guillaume's own free company. So the centre company was led by General de Division Francois Xavier Jacob Freytag, and again he had a mixture of regular battalions, volunteer battalions, and free companies of chasseurs, in this case from Paris. He also had tirailleurs drawn from the heavy infantry, if you want to call it that. One thing to point out here is that the French battalions were much bigger than the Prussian equivalents. So there's a lot of large units in this order of battle. So the French left column was led by General de Division Louis Lecoy, and he had the same setup as Freytag, with a mixture of regular infantry or Royal Infantry and volunteer infantry, plus free company of chasseurs, as well as the tirailleurs drawn from the other battalions, and in this case 5 pairs of battalion guns. He also, I believe, had the cavalry, which was the 9th Chasseurs à Cheval and the 14th Dragoons. Other people have assumed that the cavalry was with Guillaume because he was the advance guard, and that would match other French orders of battle that you see from 1793, 1794 and onwards. However, Moreau in his report specifically says that the cavalry was with his left column, and the 14th Dragoons are actually in reserve. So that's where I've put them. Obviously you can twiddle about with it as you will. It's confused because Guillaume was the furthest forward of the French columns as the battle developed, and ended up with collaborating with the cavalry. Finally, there was the reserve, which is essentially the park artillery, and this was led by General de Brigade Jean-Baptiste Félix de Manscourt de Rosailles, and he had a combination of 12-pounders, 4 12-pounders, 10 8-pounders, and 5 6-inch howitzers, and this is slightly different to what's in the book. I misinterpreted some of Colin's references, so I've corrected that in my corrections web page for those who want to seek it out. But these are the real numbers, so it's effectively one model of 12-pounder artillery, one model of 8-pounders and a model of howitzers. Also with the reserve was the 4th Regiment of Cavalry. Now I haven't represented these in the game because they didn't take part in the battle at all, except towards the end, and they lost 2 men missing, so they clearly didn't do much. Finally, there was a tiny unit or detachment of the 1st Battalion de Yonne as a sort of artillery guard. So let's move on to the Prussians, and it's the 2nd Corps of the Army de Marine. It's commanded by the Duke of Brunswick, and there you see him in his 1790s uniform. Essentially, the corps was made up of 2 divisions of infantry, supported by a reserve, included a light infantry brigade, which was deployed on the outposts throughout the battle. But dealing with the troops that were actually there, the 1st Division was led by this guy, General Lieutenant de Corbière. So de Corbière only had one of his 2 brigades present, and that was that of General Major Ludwig Prince zu Baden, and this is the handsome chap here. Unusually, his brigade contained battalions from 3 different regiments, which are listed there. They each had detachments of Schutzen and also battalion guns, in this case 6-pounder guns. There were also 2 separate artillery units which are listed there, both foot artillery. One thing to point out here is you can see that the Prussians infantry are in small units, 12-figure units. This is different to what I wrote in Throwing Thunderbolts, where I put them at 16 figures and made them standard unit. The reason I did that in the book was I wanted to give them another inbuilt advantage by giving them standard unit status, because it works out that when you take the Schutzen and the artillery crews for the battalion guns off, given the assumed strength of about 500 men, the battalion should be about 13 figures strong. There are 4 companies. I like to represent company strength, so that's why I ended up with. Again, went slightly over with 16. When it actually comes to put them on the table, though, they fit the battlefield better if they're smaller units. So I've gone with this, and we'll see how it plays out as my replays play out. A separate brigade was Roeder's brigade of guards, and this was 2 battalions of the Guards of Fuss with their 4 battalion guns, plus a small howitzer company made up of 4 guns. So the 2nd of the 2 divisions was led by this guy, General Lieutenant von Kalkstein, and he had both of his brigades with him. So his organisation was more typical. So the 1st Brigade was led by General Major von Herzberg, and his brigade was made up of the 3 battalions of the Duke of Brunswick's regiment, and that is 2 line battalions plus a battalion of grenadiers. And at this time in the war, each regiment had a full battalion of grenadiers, unlike what you see in some of the later depictions. Again, they had a small unit of Schutzen, plus battalion guns, 6-pounders again, and also an artillery company supported the brigade. So the 2nd Brigade was led by General Major von Romberg, seen here, and he had the 3 battalions of the Prince Heinrich regiment, and with their associated Schutzen and battalion guns again, 6 battalion guns, 6-pounders, and also a battalion of foot artillery, 6-pounders again. As I said earlier on, the Schutzen of both of these brigades were taken away and placed on the extreme right flank of the army in the very rough ground that I showed on the map. This is very typical of the way the Schutzen were deployed. So yes, the Prussian had light infantry, but they didn't use them in the same way as the French, and they tended to detach them away from the battalions that they came from and use them in outpost work, as they did in this battle. Finally, the Corps had a cavalry division led by this guy, General Lieutenant von Schoenfeld, and that was comprised of 2 brigades. The 1st Brigade was made up of von Katz's brigade and comprised a dragoon regiment, which I represented in 2 units to represent their 5 squadrons, plus half a horse artillery battery. There was also another dragoon regiment, which those of you who's read Throwing Thunderbolts will have seen in the original order of battle, but they were on the outpost line that I'd indicated earlier on to the west of the battlefield, and didn't take part in the fighting. So the final brigade was General Major von Borstel's brigade of cuirassiers, which again was 5 squadrons made up of his own regiment. Again, those of you who've read Throwing Thunderbolts will be wondering where the Hussars are, particularly if you've seen some of my social media posts. I did paint them up, but the reality is the Hussars, the Jaegers and the Fusilier battalions that were part of the Second Corps were not called back to the battlefield, despite the Prussians being outnumbered by about 50%. Brunswick preferred to leave the Hussars and the light infantry doing what he believed they were supposed to do, which is maintain the line of outposts to the west of Pirmasens in case of an attack by one of the other corps from the Army of the Moselle. So how did I represent it on the day in the game? Well, essentially it's about 600 figures, 40 guns and 35 limbers, and you can see some pictures of the figures here. I used the Chariot Miniatures figures for the Prussians and some of the French, and some French are also miniature figurines, and I used the Irregular Miniatures 7 Years War dragoon figures to represent the one of the regiments of dragoons on the Prussian side, and the 4th Cavalry on the French side. So in terms of victory conditions, the French are trying to force the Prussians away from Pirmasens so they can occupy it and important ground around it. So in order to do that, they need to break 3 Prussian brigades in order to break the Prussian army. The French are less articulated in their organisation, so the Prussians need to only defeat 2 of their brigades in order to break the French army and win the battle. So as regards game length is concerned, the historical battle took place between 10 AM and 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and so that represents about 13 game turns. It's a little bit of a challenge to do it in that time because the ground is so difficult for the French to get to grips with the Prussians, as you'll see with the game. But there's nothing magical about 13 game turns. It could have gone on all day. It didn't. Bar 1 o'clock in the real battle, the French were running for the hills by 1 o'clock, having been destroyed by the Prussians at their fire and their counterattack. So yeah, 13 game turns is a guide to how long it should take, but if the French do better, then it might go on longer, and probably could go, given the time of year, probably could go another 13 turns before it got dark. I wanted to say something about leadership and experience, just to finish off the orders of battle, and so I can talk about the staff ratings that I've given the two sides. And this shows you the column commanders for the French and the senior commanders for the Prussians. And obviously it's often said that the Prussians were aged commanders, and you can see a big age difference represented here between from the Duke of Brunswick up to Kalkstein at 68. However, one thing to note is two of the Prussian division commanders were fairly recent promotions to General Lieutenant, and this varies very differently from the French. You can see the French commanders are a good 20 years younger than their Prussian counterparts, but the important thing is that the seniority of them is very different. So most of these people got their rank as General of Division literally in the 2 months running up to the battle, a week even in the case of Guillaume and Freytag, and Guillaume was only a general of the brigade. So, and this probably explains why one of the criticisms of Moreau is that he really didn't get his men organised into divisions at all, and he simply arranged them in columns for the attack at 9 o'clock on the morning of the battle. On top of this, the Prussians had 5 other brigade commanders that helped with their movement of their troops. So let's now look at the two commanders, starting with the Duke of Brunswick for Prussia. He was widely regarded as the foremost soldier in Europe at the time, and was any time anybody had an army they needed command in, his name came up, and this included command of the British troops in Flanders once the Duke of York went home in 1795. His experience is extensive, and goes back to 1756 in the 7 Years' War. He was acknowledged as a master of irregular warfare, the warfare of outposts with light troops. During the War of Bavarian Succession in 1777, he was thoroughly endorsed by Frederick the Great, and then in 1787 the Prussians were widely admired for the way they put down the Dutch Patriot Revolt, pretty much simply by turning up and being there. The Prussian army more generally also gained laurels in the way they dealt with the Polish partition issue in the early 1790s. But nonetheless, the Duke of Brunswick had a strong track record, a successful track record in command. And we tend to think about him in terms of what happened at Auerstadt, where he died. in 1806, and that tends to mask his real performance earlier on in his career. So let's talk about Jean-René Moreau of the commanding the French Corps de Vosges. His experience goes back to enlisting in the ranks of the Royal Army in 1776-78. He was on St. Lucia in 1778, but then retired from the army and went back to running a family business. But when the revolution broke out, he joined the 1st Ardennes Volunteers in 1792 and was elected their lieutenant colonel. So he had experience at early battles of the First War of the First Coalition and had been wounded twice. So Léon Moreau was a grandson of René, and he wrote a book about his grandfather, where he felt that military history had not done his father a service, and he ended up in correspondence with Jomini, and this is what Jomini said about René. If your brave ancestor could not be classified among the great outstanding captains as Frederick the Great and Napoleon, he should be counted amongst those second-rate generals whom the revolution brought forth and who saved France by their courage, their energy, their self-denial and a natural talent for war. And, you know, whatever we tend to think about these guys from 200 years, it's worth noting that Moreau got his name on the Arc de Triomphe amongst many more famous names that you can see in the picture on the right. So in terms of the game, how do we represent this in terms of staff ratings in black powder? Well, this is what I went with. The Prussians, I gave a staff rating of 8, which is good, and the French a rating of 7, which is average. However, it is modified by the fact that obviously not only is the Duke of Brunswick there, but there are 3 division commanders, and so each one of those commanders has the ability to give a re-roll to one of their brigade commanders a turn, and you really got a choice. You can either put the Prussian staff rating up to 9 and not bother with any re-rolls. It's because the effect is about the same, but I think this is probably the best way of doing it. With a staff rating of 7, it's arguable whether the French commander deserves a re-roll, but he's got no other role unless you give him a re-roll, so I gave him one. So when you look at the averages of rolling 2d6, what that turns out into, the Prussians will move perhaps 1.4 moves a turn, whereas the French will only average 1 move a turn. If you want a game to run quicker, it's probably worth giving the French a slightly higher staff rating, say up to 8, because that will move things along. The re-rolls have an effect of moving the Prussians up to 1.8 moves a turn, and the French up to probably close to 1.4. So in the next section, I'm going to show some photographs of the game as it was originally set up on the day. But I thought I'd start with this picture from Wargame Soldiers and Strategy, which shows me using my fire to make sure I put the troops in the right place. But the real purpose of showing it is it really brings home the vast size of the hall in which salute is held, and it is quite a daunting stage to fill. In this shot you can see my new teardrop banner which gets my branding out there, and QR code for more information about my efforts. You can also see sitting at the table is James, who helps me a lot with these salute visits, because it's a drive that I don't really like doing, so he does for me. And obviously it's definitely a two-man job managing salute. In the background you see my university pal Andy King from Maidstone War Games Society. We met at university more than 40 odd years ago, so we've known each other. We usually see each other at salute, but it's the first time we've been side by side. So this is a shot of the table, which, like all photographs, doesn't give you a real impression of the hilly nature of it. But what I'm now going to do is go round both sides and show you how the organisations I've just gone through are represented on the table. So this is a side view of the French force. And this is Moreau's eye view of the Prussian force facing him. At the front there are the dragoons of von Katt and Hahn's half horse battery, supported by von Borstel's cuirassier brigade. At the back there you can see von Roeder's brigade of two Guards du Fus battalions with their accompanying battalion guns and their Schützen. So behind the main Prussian gun line you can see von Romberg's brigade of Kalkstein's division. And to the left you can see von Hertzberg's brigade over quite a wide deployment area. Going back to the guns, one of the things that Brunswick did in this battle is that he brigaded together von Kalkstein's battalion guns into the two units there represented on the left of the gun line there. One of 6 guns and one of 4. Here's another shot of James with the Prussians, and you can also see the desktop roller banner to James's right. And here highlighted is Corbier's division, or the brigade of it that's present, the Prince of Baden, with his 3 battalions with their battalion guns and Schützen. And here's a close-up of Pirmasens itself with the town wall around it. The town was granted special status in 1750 and was allowed to build this wall. So it was pretty new. I was very surprised to see it was white, so had to do my best off-white colours to make it fit in. And finally, let's look in more detail at the French. And on the right you can see Guillaume's column, and to their left Freytag's central column, and with Lecoy's left column with the cavalry at the top of the box, and finally Manscour's Park Artillery Brigade. So in this last section of the video I'm going to show all the photographs I've managed to take myself, James took, and also gathered around from the internet from all of the many great reporters who report on the show. And this will give you some close-up views of the troops in action. As regards to the game itself, we didn't manage to finish it. This was largely because, as everybody now knows, the salute was probably had 50% more attendees than normal, and so we were very busy discussing the game with people who came by. And then by the time you've given myself and James an hour to walk around the rest of the show, your game times more limited than you would like. So we didn't really get that far down the game. This was aggravated by James's decision to leave his cavalry forward and even to try and attack the French, which was very different to what Brunswick did. But that delayed the French advance because, as those of you who've read the book know, at this stage, 1793, I don't allow the French infantry to form square because they're too full of recruits, and they really struggled until the middle of 1794 before forming square became something they could do reliably. So there was no charging across the table by the French in this game. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope if you didn't get to salute, you can see us at Partisan. We'll be taking this same game. And if you did like the video, please like and subscribe in the normal way. And obviously, most of all, if you haven't already purchased Foreign Thunderbolts, please give it a consider, because there's lots of content in it, just like that I've highlighted in this video. Thank you and goodbye.